The sea was quieter that night, as though the world itself held its breath beneath the pale gaze of the full moon. The air shimmered with a strange expectancy, a silvery hum threading through the waves and the stones. A girl stood barefoot on the wet sand, her shadow long and trembling, her heart caught between the pull of the tide and something greater, something calling her name from above. The melody rose, soft as a sigh, clear as crystal, music without a source, born from the moonlight itself. Her feet began to move before her mind could follow, tracing circles in the surf, her body a vessel of rhythm and ache. The world around her seemed to blur. Stars bent closer. The horizon glowed faintly, and for the first time the sea did not feel like home. It felt like a threshold. Dawn found the village hushed and untouched, as though the night had stolen something vital. The girl awoke in her small seaside cottage, the echoes of that melody still pulsing faintly beneath her ribs. She tried to recall its pattern, but it vanished like mist between her fingers. Outside, the gulls cried over the still sea, and fishermen's boats drifted through a fog too thick for the sun to pierce. The air held the scent of salt and longing. When she looked down at her feet, she saw traces of light still clinging to her skin, faint silver dust that shimmered and disappeared. For the first time, the day felt wrong, too loud, too bright, too heavy to dance in. That night, the tide returned higher than before, whispering secrets against the cliffs. The girl stood once more at the water's edge, her heart restless and her body remembering the dance. But no music came, only the sigh of the waves. The silence pressed against her chest until she closed her eyes and began to move anyway. Slowly, clumsily at first, then with gathering grace, as though her soul still heard what her ears could not. The stars shifted above, faint ripples of light spreading from the horizon as if something far away stirred in response. The sea shimmered faintly, and she wondered if the moon remembered her. Days blurred together. The melody did not return. Yet she could not stop listening for it. Villagers began to whisper about the girl who danced by the tide and spoke to the moon. Children watched from the dunes, silent and afraid. She no longer joined the market laughter, nor tended the nets as before. Her nights were consumed by waiting, her days by remembering. And still, when the sea sighed, she turned toward it with the unshakable certainty that something beyond it breathed her name. Then, on the seventh night, the moon rose swollen and bright, so close it touched the sea. A low hum filled the air once more, deeper and clearer than before, a resonance that seemed to lift the tide itself. The girl's heart answered instinctively. Without thought, she stepped into the surf, the water glowing where it met her skin. The melody enveloped her, and the world beyond its sound fell away. Somewhere far above, the moon stirred. Somewhere within it, a prince opened his eyes. The air trembled as night deepened, and the sea no longer seemed still. A pale radiance shimmered along the horizon, widening into a gleaming bridge that touched the sand before her feet. She felt neither fear nor hesitation, only recognition, as though her heart had been waiting for this precise shape of light. The melody she had once dreamed returned, resonant and alive, a song that seemed to rise from within her bones. Each note pulled her forward, and with every step, the world behind her dimmed. The stars swayed above, whispering in languages she had never heard yet somehow understood. She lifted her hand, and the beam brightened, answering her gesture. Between the sea and the heavens, a path had opened, and it bore her name. The first step upon the path felt weightless. The sea gave way beneath her as if recognizing her touch, holding her above the water without a ripple. The beam pulsed underfoot, alive with rhythm and color, cool silvers and faint blues that rippled like heartbeats through glass. She walked carefully at first, her reflection following half a second behind, a ghost of light. The world grew smaller with each step. The sound of waves replaced by a deep, resonant silence that seemed to vibrate in her chest. Somewhere ahead, within the brilliant haze, She sensed a presence watching, an unseen gaze as ancient as the stars, patient and impossibly kind. The light thickened into mist as she climbed higher, and the air grew cold and still. Above her, constellations shimmered close enough to touch, yet the sea below had disappeared into darkness. The melody that guided her deepened into chords she could feel rather than hear. Then the mist parted, revealing a vast expanse of silver plains, an ocean frozen in motion where no wind stirred. Standing at its center, a tall figure waited, his form sculpted from the same light that formed the path. He did not move or speak, yet she felt the pull of his presence like gravity, ancient and gentle. The moon was no longer just above her. She was inside it. When he finally moved, it was not toward her, but around her. A slow, deliberate motion that rippled through the still air like the start of a dance. She did not understand the gesture, yet her body answered before thought could follow. One step, then another, her movements instinctive, guided by something beyond will. Their rhythm met midway between them, a pulse that bridged silence and song. As they circled each other, the lunar sea began to glow brighter, revealing countless shimmering shapes beneath the surface, spirits of forgotten dances, fragments of dreams that had once reached for the moon. The path between them grew shorter until distance itself ceased to exist. Time dissolved in that place. She did not know how long they moved together. Hours, or perhaps lifetimes, until the dance slowed and silence fell again. The figure raised his hand, and the sea of light around them responded, bending upward into waves that curled toward the stars. Within each crest shimmered visions of Earth, the shore, the cottage, the sleeping village below. Her eyes widened, filled with sudden sorrow. The pull of the moon was sweet and endless, but it carried the weight of forgetting. She reached out as though to hold both worlds in her grasp, but the moment she did, the vision of Earth dimmed. The lunar plain breathed softly, a living ocean of light that undulated beneath her feet. Here, sound moved differently. Each note of motion birthed a chord of silence, each breath leaving ripples through eternity. She had forgotten the weight of her body, forgotten the pull of the tide below. When she moved, the ground itself shimmered in response, shaping waves of radiance that followed her rhythm. The Moon Prince watched her quietly, his expression unreadable, as though seeing his own reflection in her movements. Around them, orbs of dim light hovered in the still air, flickering with faint memories of stars. For the first time, she felt not like a girl who danced, but like the dance itself, the pulse between worlds. Endless and untethered, far below, the sea of Earth stretched dark and quiet. The villagers no longer saw her dancing by the tide. The sands where she once stood now held only the memory of footprints erased too soon. Yet, sometimes, when the moon rose full, the waves glowed faintly silver, and whispers drifted through the wind. Fragments of her song carried across the ocean's skin. Aaron stood on the cliffs, listening to what others could not hear, his heart straining toward a rhythm beyond the world. He did not know if she lived, or if she had become something else entirely. He only knew the nights were colder now, and that the moonlight no longer felt like mercy. Above, time ceased to matter. The Moon Prince guided her through steps that defied gravity, movements that unfolded like starlight, spiraling through invisible paths. Their dance became a communion of balance and surrender, each turn unraveling a piece of her memory of Earth. The more she learned, the more she forgot. Her name began to fade on her tongue. Her laughter dissolved into the hum of celestial resonance. Yet, in brief moments between the rhythm, a flicker of something human still stirred. An ache she could neither name nor silence. The Moon Prince saw it too, a tremor in her motion that echoed a sorrow he had long buried. On Earth, the villagers began to forget her name. Faces that once smiled in greeting now drew blank when her cottage was mentioned. The window where she used to watch the sea grew fogged and lifeless, the wood swelling with damp salt. Only Aaron remembered, though even his dreams faltered, her image slipping through his grasp like mist. One night, he saw the tide rise higher than it ever had before, silver shining on every crest, and he whispered her name into the wind, half prayer, half defiance. Far above, on the lunar plain, Lyra paused, mid-dance, her breath catching as though she had heard something faint and impossible. The Moon Prince spoke at last, his voice quiet as windless night. He told her that no mortal could dance forever without forgetting the earth that birthed them, that to belong fully to the moon, she must release all memory of the tide, the scent of salt, the warmth of hands once held. She listened, trembling, her heart torn between the infinite and the fleeting. The light around her pulsed gently, urging her toward surrender. She closed her eyes, and for one suspended heartbeat, she felt both worlds tug at her soul, the eternal stillness above and the restless sea below. And then she stepped closer to him, her decision shining like sorrow caught in silver. The moonlight grew heavier. Each breath of the lunar air shimmered with invisible tension, like glass about to crack. Lyra felt it before she saw it, the shift beneath her feet, the trembling of the silver plane that once pulsed in harmony with her steps. The melody no longer followed her rhythm. It resisted, pulling against her like an unseen tide. When she looked to the Moon Prince, his eyes were bright with worry. The light around him dimmed at the edges, his own glow fading in uneven waves. The dance that had once united them was becoming a fracture in the firmament, each motion sending small ripples of shadow through the endless white. She understood then. Love had changed the pattern of the moon itself. The music faltered, and silence spread like ink across the horizon. From that silence, new shapes began to emerge. Echoes of her own shadow cast across the light. Each one moved half a second too late, mimicking her gestures imperfectly, spreading distortion through the lunar waves. The Moon Prince called out to her, his voice breaking through the still air, but she could no longer hear him clearly. Her heartbeat had become the rhythm, and the moon could not contain it. The luminous plains rippled violently, scattering fragments of light into the void. Somewhere in that storm of brilliance, she understood what her dance had done. It had made the moon remember how to feel. Below, the tides on Earth shifted unnaturally. The fishermen woke to find their boats torn from moorings, waves glowing faintly, as though lit from beneath. Aaron stood at the cliff's edge once more, watching the sea writhe under a moon that no longer seemed merciful. The sky had darkened, the stars veiled by restless clouds, and still he waited, feeling her presence in every surge of wind. He called her name into the storm, his voice lost in thunder that seemed to answer back. The sea rose in furious arcs, glowing brighter than lightning. For one brief heartbeat, he saw her reflection shimmer in the wave, a fleeting image of her eyes, sorrowful and unreachable. On the moon, silence returned. But it was not peace. Cracks began to form beneath Lyra's feet, glowing with deep red light that had never before touched this realm. The Moon Prince knelt, pressing his hand to the surface, his expression haunted. He spoke of laws older than time, of hearts not meant to beat in eternal light. The moon was beginning to remember pain, and through it, the earth began to forget warmth. Lyra's hands trembled. Her dance had awakened love where none had belonged, and now it was unraveling both worlds. The horizon flickered like a dying flame. Her reflection in the silver ground blinked once and did not move again. Then the eclipse began. A great shadow bloomed across the sky, devouring the silver plains in darkness. Lyra turned toward the dimming light, her pulse matching the rhythm of the fading moon. The Moon Prince took her hand, his touch cool as glass, and for an instant their heartbeats aligned, one mortal, one eternal. The sound echoed through the hollow silence, and cracks of black light streaked across the horizon. She saw in his eyes both love and terror, the same understanding that filled her. Their bond had doomed them. As the shadow consumed the last of the light, her final tear drifted upward, turning to starlight before it touched the ground. The eclipse passed, but the damage remained. The moon's surface trembled, its silver glow dimmed to pale ash. Lyra stood at the edge of the vast fracture, staring into its depths, where fragments of starlight drifted like drowning souls. Every motion of her body sent ripples of light that refused to fade. The silence was unbearable. It felt like breathing inside a dream that had already ended. Then, from somewhere deep within the void below, came a sound. A pulse. It was faint at first, but unmistakable. The heartbeat of the sea. The earth was calling her name. The sound threaded through her like an ache long forgotten, pulling memories from the dark. Salt, wind, laughter, and warmth. She pressed her hand against her chest, afraid to answer, yet unable not to. Far below, the sea rose without wind. The villagers fled the shore, but Aaron stayed, his small boat rocking violently against the tide. He felt her presence like a storm breaking inside his bones. The moon was pale, but its reflection churned wildly, forming spirals of light that clawed toward the sky. The sound that filled the air was neither thunder nor music. It was her heartbeat, echoing through the water. He gripped the boat's mast and shouted her name into the rising spray. The world seemed to hold its breath. And for one impossible instant, he thought he saw her face shimmer in the waves, eyes bright with starlight, lips parting as though she remembered his voice. Above the storm, Lyra felt his voice reach her. It came as warmth, threading through the cold stillness, breaking the silence that had bound her to the moon. The Moon Prince turned sharply, his gaze finding hers, knowing what she had heard. "If you follow it," he said, his tone quiet but breaking. "You will fall?" She shook her head, the tears shining like constellations. "Then let me fall," she whispered. "For I have forgotten what it feels like to belong." The lunar plains darkened around them, the path of light reawakening under her bare feet. Glowing brighter than before, she turned toward it once more, her steps pulling the moon's light down toward the waiting sea. The descent began slowly. Each step drew her further from the calm of eternity and closer to the roar of waves below. Around her, fragments of moonlight broke away, falling like petals into the void. The closer she came to the earth, the louder the sea cried. The bridge trembled underfoot, its glow dimming with every heartbeat. She looked up once more to where the Moon Prince stood, his form already dissolving into radiance, his gaze locked to hers until distance swallowed it. The pain in her chest was unbearable, but beneath it throbbed something fierce and living. The world below, wild and imperfect, was calling her home. As she neared the sea, the storm roared in full fury. The bridge shattered behind her, scattering shards of light across the sky like dying stars. Aaron saw her form, emerging through the tempest, a figure of silver, descending through lightning and rain. He reached upward as the waves surged around him, his heart breaking open with a cry that tore the wind apart. She fell the final distance not with fear, but with grace, her body folding into the ocean's arms as though returning to something sacred. For a heartbeat, the world was silent. Then the sea exhaled, the storm broke, and moonlight and water became one. The sea cradled her like memory, and when she rose from the waves, the night itself seemed to bow in reverence. Aaron stumbled forward, unable to speak, watching light dissolve from her skin like the final embers of a dream. She breathed, fragile but alive, her chest heaving with air that tasted of salt and home. Yet, beneath the warmth of that return, lay something wrong. The tide pulsed with unnatural rhythm, the waves glowing faintly, even after the storm had passed. Above them, the moon trembled, fractured into thin, quivering arcs of silver. She touched Aaron's hand, and the ground shuddered beneath their feet. Every heartbeat that rejoined the earth tore another thread from the sky. For days, the sea would not rest. Lyra wandered the cliffs in silence, her steps leaving faint silver traces that faded by morning. The villagers whispered of curses and omens, claiming the moon itself had cracked because of her. She tried to laugh, but her voice carried a hollow echo now, as if the air could not hold it. Aaron followed her everywhere, refusing to let her fade again. At night, when she danced to quiet the tides, the ocean brightened, and the stars blinked as though weeping. The boundary between heaven and earth had thinned, and though the world pretended not to see, every wave whispered her secret. She did not fully belong to either world anymore. At dusk, the sea began to hum again. Lyra stood by the water's edge, her reflection flickering between shadow and light. When she lifted her arms, the tide responded, swelling higher, glowing brighter. She could feel the moon pulling at her, calling her back with invisible threads. Aaron ran to her side, shouting her name, but the sound only deepened the resonance. The waves rose in rhythm with her movements, each crest mimicking the curve of her hands. The sky darkened as though refusing to watch, and the world trembled beneath the pressure of two wills, one yearning for flight, the other for home. Her tears fell, dissolving into the glowing water, and the dance began once more. Each night grew shorter. The moon's pieces drifted further apart, scattering light across the sea like falling glass. Lyra grew weaker with every tide, her steps slower, her voice dimmer. She told Aaron she could feel the moon prince, watching from the broken horizon, silent but near. "He doesn't blame me," she whispered, "but the moon does." Aaron held her close, swearing to keep her safe, but she smiled sadly, knowing safety was no longer part of her story. When she closed her eyes, she saw both men, one of earth, one of light, and felt her heart splitting between them. The sea's song grew louder, almost pleading. Something had to end before both worlds shattered completely. The final night came quietly. The sea was still, the air too calm. Lyra stood once more at the water's edge, her dress torn to threads of silver mist. Aaron stood beside her, holding her trembling hand. Overhead, the last fragment of the moon hung low and red, beating like a wounded heart. "If I dance again," she said softly, "the world may mend, or break entirely." He nodded, unable to speak, knowing that love would ask of them both the same sacrifice. She stepped forward, the waves parting to meet her, the water glowing beneath her feet. Each motion sent ripples of light and darkness through the sea and the sky, and as she turned her final circle, the ocean began to rise. When she began to dance again, the world did not tremble. It listened. Every movement was slower now, measured and fragile, like the heartbeat of dawn before the sun rises. The sea brightened around her, silver bleeding into gold, and the air thickened with silence so pure it hurt. Aaron watched from the shore, his hands clasped in prayer, though he no longer knew to whom. Above, the fractured moon stirred, its scattered shards quivering in answer to her rhythm. The melody returned, not from the heavens, but from the water itself. Her feet traced circles of light, each step stitching a thread between sky and sea, between what was lost and what must remain. The moonlight began to mend. Its broken pieces rose from the sea, slow and silent, drawn upward by her motion. Each fragment hovered for a heartbeat before dissolving into the sky, finding its rightful place among the stars. Lyra's body shimmered brighter with every turn, her edges blurring as though she were becoming light itself. She could feel the ocean's pull loosening, her weight lessening. Aaron called out to her, voice trembling with both awe and fear, but she only smiled through tears. "The world remembers," she whispered. "That is enough." The wind lifted her hair as the water glowed beneath her feet like molten moonstone, reflecting both her and the dawn she would never see. As the moon healed, the sky began to brighten. Dawn crept across the horizon in soft strokes of amber and rose, painting the waves with color for the first time in what felt like centuries. Lyra faltered, her strength fading, but the light held her up. The ocean no longer resisted. It carried her gently as if grateful. Erin waded into the surf, arms outstretched, and she turned toward him one last time. Their eyes met, and the distance between them folded away. He whispered her name, and the sound bridged every space. Mortal, celestial, eternal. Her smile lingered as her body dissolved into threads of shimmering mist, each strand drifting toward the rising sun. When the last of her light vanished, the sea fell still. The world exhaled. Above, the moon shone whole again, softer, dimmer, but alive. Erin stood motionless in the shallows, hands cupped as if holding something invisible. A single droplet of light remained between his fingers, warm against his skin. He pressed it to his heart and closed his eyes. The villagers emerged from their homes to find the tide calm, the air golden, the moon serene. They would not remember the girl's name nor her dance, but the sea would never again be silent. In every ripple, the faint echo of her song lingered, the memory of love that mended the night. Years passed, and the story faded into whispers. The villagers spoke of the moon's bride, a spirit who danced between tides and kept storms at bay. On clear nights, when the full moon touched the water, silver ripples spread across the bay, and those who watched closely swore they could see her silhouette moving across the light. The sea remained gentle, the sky merciful, and somewhere in the rhythm of the waves, in the lullabies sung by mothers to their children, her melody lived on. She had become both memory and myth, the girl who danced with the moon and remembered, too late, that she belonged to both worlds.